move it to a point where before long we can actually adopt something. So I thank the chair, and I would yield the floor. Mr. President, I suggest the absence of a quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.
dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent to speak as if in morning business for up to 15 minutes.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm joined on the floor today for his first time on the Senate floor, John Crown, who works on our Veterans Affairs issues, came from the Veterans Committee and joined our staff in the last couple of weeks. And John Crown is a Marine, did 2 tours of duty in Iraq, and we honor him for his service. And he is, it seems, wants to dedicate his life to serving people who also serve their country, and people of all ages and both genders and all ideologies, and who served their country any time in the last several decades. So I wanted to announce his first visit to the Senate floor today. Mr. President, 70 years ago this week, and on April 18, 1942, 80 brave American airmen volunteered for an extremely hazardous mission. The presiding officer of the Senior Center for Pennsylvania knows that I like to come to the Senate floor and talk about history and honor people who have played such an important role in our history. And I want to talk about these heroic men. They were known as the Doolittle Tokyo Raiders. They accepted their mission without knowing what it really entailed. The mission, which followed the attack on Pearl Harbor, this is April 18, 1942. Pearl Harbor had happened, obviously, the December before, was our nation's first offensive against on Japanese soil in the Second World War. Planned and led by Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Doolittle, the mission was risky from the outset. It was the first time the Army Air Corps and the Navy collaborated in a tactical mission, flying 16 U.S. Army Air Corps B-25 Mitchell bombers from the deck of this USS Hornet, a feat that had never been attempted before. The morning of the raid, the USS Hornet encountered Japanese ships 170 miles from the prearranged launch point. Fearing the mission might be compromised, the raiders proceeded to launch 170 miles earlier than anticipated. By departing 650 miles from their intended target, these men accepted the risk they might not have enough fuel to make it beyond the Japanese lines to occupied China. Accepting this choice meant the raiders would almost certainly have to crash land or bail out, either above Japanese-occupied China or even over the home islands in Japan. Any survivors, they knew, would certainly be subjected to imprisonment or torture or death. After reaching their targets, 15 of the bombers continued to China, while the 16th, dangerously low on fuel, headed to Russia. The total distance traveled by the raiders averaged 2,200 nautical miles over 13 hours, making it the longest combat mission ever flown in a B-25 bomber during the war. Of the 80, that's 80, of the 80 raiders who were launched that day, 8 were captured. Of these 8 prisoners, 3 were executed, 1 died of disease. 4 of these prisoners returned home after the end of the war. Of the original 80 raiders, 5 are still with us today, and they are celebrating this week their 70th anniversary in Dayton, Ohio, honoring their fellow raiders who are no longer with them. As they gather this week, I'm proud to introduce this resolution with my colleagues from both parties and from each state where these men reside. It's my pleasure to have Senator Hutchinson from Texas, Senator Murray from Washington State, Senator Alexander from Tennessee, Senator Tester from Montana, and Senator Baucus also from Montana, and Senator Nelson as my co-sponsors. It's my sincere privilege, especially to have Senator Inouye and Lautenberg, both veterans of the war, as co-sponsors too. As the raiders gather this week, these 5 men will honor other heroes, and this is what's even perhaps as interesting as the first part, the Chinese citizens who cared for, protected, and enabled them to survive in a foreign land, a very foreign land to these American men. A Chinese delegation is coming to Dayton for the reunion. Among the delegation is a man whose father helped carry injured raiders to safety and even nursed 1 raider to health. I would be certain that they couldn't talk to each other in a common language. They had never seen anybody like the other one, yet a Chinese, helped this American airman. It's only fitting we recognize this week's anniversary and commend the 5 living members and the 75 deceased members of the Doolittle Tokyo Raiders for their heroism on that day. It's fitting that we remember the compassion showed to the raiders by the Chinese villagers they encountered. The Senate resolution is our humble attempt to show our gratitude. The valor, the skill, the courage shown by the Raiders proved invaluable to the eventual defeat of Japan during the Second World War. Today, these men, with their Chinese friends, remind us that quiet decency and uncommon valor in the face of sure danger, however rare, are traits that know no limit. I thank the President. I would ask the President, presiding officer, that the following comments be a separate place in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last 2 weeks, most members of the Senate were back in their states, talking, I hope listening more than talking, and learning more than perhaps talking, learning about issues and problems in what they were seeing and hearing in their state. I was in Ohio from Ashtabula to Parma to Zanesville to meet with Ohioans and discuss ways to get our economy back on track. Too many Ohioans are struggling, as too many people in Pennsylvania are struggling. Many are still looking for work. Others have seen their wages cut or their hours reduced. But there are, from Chillicothe to Toledo, from Portsmouth to Mansfield, there are signs of recovery as our manufacturers, especially auto suppliers, but much more than that, and some of the small businesses supplying these companies are beginning to show real signs of growth. Few places are more symbolic of this than a company called American Manufacturing. The name of the company is American Manufacturing, located in Toledo. 3 years ago, the auto industry, as we know, was on the verge of collapse, threatening to take down with it thousands of auto parts suppliers. American Manufacturing got down to 4 employees. They had been 125. They supply container crates, metal container crates for the auto industry. Once been 125, down to 4 employees. President Bush tried, but was blocked mostly by Republicans in the United States Senate, his own party members, to do a bridge loan and assistance for the auto industry. President Obama, with a strong Democratic majority, over the opposition of many, many Republicans, although some Republicans in my part of the country, the industrial areas around Ohio, including Ohio, were supportive, were able to rescue this industry. We knew that rescuing the auto industry was way more than about helping Chrysler and General Motors. We knew that it mattered for not just those large companies and their workers. It mattered for Johnson Controls. It mattered for Magnum. It mattered for small companies like American Manufacturing in Toledo, companies that depended on the auto industry. In fact, Mr. President, estimates are that 800,000 people in Ohio are in the auto industry one way or the other, directly or indirectly work for auto companies. These 800,000 plus jobs were dependent on Congress moving forward in early 2009 and doing the right thing. The decision wasn't popular. There were all kinds of naysayers. There's no question now that it was a success. A number of people, from Governor Romney to lots of people around the country, lots of conservative politicians in Washington, said, let the companies go into bankruptcy. We can structure it, but let them go into bankruptcy, and then put the financing together to come out of bankruptcy. The only problem is nobody from Bain Capital to First National Bank would be willing to loan money to these 2 behemoths, Chrysler and GM, that were in such terrible situations and such terrible problems. But you know what? The government loaned the money. Much of that money's paid back, and things are better. But let's not forget that in January 2009, when President Obama took office, we were losing 800,000 jobs a month. Our economy was in free fall. This is the time the auto industry was going down. To stop the bleeding, one of the things we did was unlock the frozen credit market for small businesses and manufacturers through the Small Business Administration. Through these SBA loans, we saw a local bank in Toledo, Ohio, a new bank, a bank that had only been around for a handful of years, step up, invest capital in American Manufacturing, in this company in Toledo, and this company now is about to hire its 100th person. This company is successful now, because of the auto rescue, and it's successful because of the Small Business Administration coming out of the Recovery Act, having enough money to guarantee loans with this local community bank, not a Wall Street bank, but a local community bank to get this company on its feet. Now we're seeing, Mr. President, even with all of this, with the auto rescue working, and we know two terrific examples of how it's working in my state. The Chevy Cruze, made in Youngstown, Ohio, assembled in Youngstown, Ohio. My 28-year-old daughter drives a Chevy Cruze. The Chevy Cruze would probably not exist today if it weren't for the auto rescue. And here's what it means to Ohio. The engine is made in Defiance, Ohio. The bumper is made in Northwood, Ohio. The transmission's made in Toledo, Ohio. The sound system's made in Springboro, Ohio. The steel comes out of Butler County, Ohio, Middletown, Ohio. The aluminum comes out of Cleveland. The stamping's done in Parma. And the assembly is done in Lordstown, Ohio. Look at the Jeep Wrangler. The Jeep Wrangler was made in Toledo prior to the auto rescue, was assembled in Toledo. But only 50% of the parts for the Jeep Wrangler were made in the United States. Today, the Wrangler, with more people working there, producing more cars, are still assembled in Ohio, yet 75 in Toledo, yet 75% of the parts, not 50% what it was, 75% of those parts now come from companies in Ohio, or companies in the United States, made by workers in the United States. But we're now seeing, though, Mr. President, in addition, but as the auto industry begins to grow, and the auto rescue was so clearly the right thing to do, then thank God this Senate didn't listen and the House didn't listen to the naysayers. In spite of that, we're still seeing huge trade deficits with China in auto parts. 10 years ago, our trade deficit with China in auto parts was about $1 billion. That meant about $1 billion more. We bought about $1 million more car parts from China than we sold to China. That was back 10 years ago. Today, that number's grown to almost $10 billion. George Bush, the first George Bush, President Bush, said that $1 billion trade deficit, meaning you buy $1 billion more than you sell to another country, $1 billion trade deficit translating into about 13,000 jobs. Well, today, do the math. Today, the trade deficit, the bilateral trade deficit between the United States and China on auto parts alone is $10 billion. And we're seeing it in other things. We see it in auto. We see it in solar. We see that China uses unfair subsidies. They subsidize water, they subsidize energy, they subsidize land, they subsidize credit, and on top of that, they have a currency advantage because of their manipulating of the currency. Sitting idly by is not an option. My colleagues on both sides of the aisle understand that. That's why my China currency manipulation bill, the biggest bipartisan bill to pass the Senate in 2011 by more than 70 votes, costing taxpayers nothing but leveling the playing field so China can't manipulate its currency and cheat in international trade. That legislation passed, as I said, with 70 votes. A recently released report shows that if this Congress, meaning the House of Representatives down the hall, if they would pass this and send it to the President's desk and the President would sign it, that by addressing China currency manipulation, it could support the creation of 2.2 million American jobs without adding a dime to the deficit. In fact, it would be the opposite. If you take 2 million people who are now unemployed and put them in jobs of $15 and $20 and $25 an hour, manufacturing jobs, you clearly would see you'd clearly see the deficit shrink. More people would be back on the payroll, paying taxes to and contributing to their community. It's time to take bold action. It's time to stand up on China currency. I appreciate the support of my colleagues in the Senate on the China currency bill. Time is running out in the House. I'm hopeful that the House of Representatives passes this bill too. It's time we put American workers and American manufacturing companies first. Thank the presiding officer, and I yield the floor, and I suggest the absence of the quorum.
The clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Akaka. Mr. President,
The senator from Louisiana.
I ask unanimous consent to dispense with the quorum call.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. I come to the floor today to mark and celebrate the career of a Louisiana native, a very dear friend of mine and someone that is admired by literally thousands, if not millions of people in Texas and around the world. That gentleman is Dr. Kenneth Hall. Next week, Dr. Hall will retire after almost 2 decades of leadership at Buckner International, which is one of the world's outstanding nonprofit organizations formed many years ago in Texas. Dr. Hall served as the 5th president, only the 5th president, in over 120 years. After his retirement as president in 2010, he's continued to serve as CEO of this fine organization. Buckner, as it is known, is a global Christian ministry that does extraordinary work with vulnerable children and families throughout Texas and other places in the United States, and recently expanded internationally. They help to run self-sufficiency programs, community transformation programs, education, job readiness and training, after-school programs for vulnerable children, and remarkably, I've seen their work both in downtown Dallas, Texas, as well as out in remote villages in Ethiopia, and the quality and expertise is identical and it is heartwarming. The causes of vulnerable children, both here and overseas, is something, of course, that's extremely close to my heart. I've spent a good bit of time here in the Senate working with my colleagues on issues that advance their welfare, and it's been my privilege and honor to know Dr. Hall over the past several years. He was born in Louisiana, earned his B.A. from the University of Texas at Tyler. He earned a Master's of Divinity and Doctor of Ministry degree from Southwest Baptist Theological Seminary in Fort Worth. Before his career started at Buckner, he served as pastor of 4 churches in Texas. He's been married for many years, a beautiful family, his wife Linda, and their 2 married children and their grandchildren. But I want to say just a brief word about Buckner itself. It was founded over 135 years ago when a Baptist minister, R.C. Buckner, started an orphanage with an initial donation of $27. He literally, Mr. President, took off his hat, as the story goes, put $1 in it, passed it around to the ministers present, and with $27 started the first orphanage west of the Mississippi to help the children that were coming on those orphan trains across our nation. Took them off of those trains and gave them homes and families. The organization has grown since then, but under Dr. Hall's leadership, Buckner expanded to include more than $200 million in capital improvements, an endowment of more than $200 million. He also worked to expand Buckner's reach, as I said, overseas. I had the pleasure of traveling with him to Ethiopia recently, and I witnessed firsthand the incredible work and his personal passion for helping families become more self-sufficient, maintaining children in their birth family groups, and helping to literally transform communities with this special Buckner touch. So it has been said before, to be who you are and become what you are capable of is the only goal worth living. It is my hope that Dr. Hall will continue to achieve his goal in this life. We will miss him, his selfless service and his dedication, and we honor him today in the United States Senate for over 2 decades of service to one of the nation's best nonprofit faith-based organizations. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.
Mr. President.
The senator from Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm delighted to follow my colleague from Louisiana because I'm rising this evening to talk about a bill that she has put an enormous amount of effort into, and she's really had a very significant role in the success on the bill that I'm going to talk about. We have a bill in Congress that is perhaps the most significant jobs bill that we'll be able to pass in this session. It's described as producing 2.9 million jobs, nearly 3 million jobs. Rhode Island is a relatively small state, but it means 9,000 jobs in the state of Rhode Island. We have about 60-some thousand people out of work right now in Rhode Island. 9,000 takes a significant number of those folks and enables them to get to work. It is a serious jobs bill. It also went through a completely impeccable process here in the Senate. It passed out of the Environment Public Works Committee with the strong support of our chairman, Barbara Boxer, and the equally strong support of her ranking member, Senator Inhofe of Oklahoma. They come from quite different political persuasions, but they were together on this bill, and it passed unanimously out of the Environment and Public Works Committee. It came to the floor. We had a completely open process on the floor. It spent 5 weeks on this floor being discussed, debated, and amended. And it was quite thoroughly amended. There were more than 40 amendments that were either voted on or accepted while it was here and on the floor. So from a process point of view, it was exactly what everybody hopes for in a piece of legislation. And it passed out of the Senate with 74 senators voting for it, a 75th who would have voted for it but had to be away in his home state. So the final tally, in effect, would be 75 to 22, a landslide bipartisan vote. A jobs bill that passed with an impeccable legislative process and produced a landslide bipartisan vote. What is that bill? It's the highway bill. It's a bill that we've been working on now in Congress since the days of the federal highway system under President Eisenhower. It's not complicated. Everybody understands it, and 3 million jobs depend on its passage. Unfortunately, it's snarled up for reasons that are hard to explain over in the House of Representatives. The Speaker has not called up this bipartisan, very well-regarded Senate bill. It has support outside this institution from everybody from the United States Chamber of Commerce to the Laborers International Union. It has environmentalist support. This is a bill that's not being held up in the House because there's an important interest that was overlooked or that is an adversary to it. It's just being held up for, I don't know, I would say Washington insider reasons having to do with the politics of the House of Representatives. But when there are 3 million jobs at stake, that's a real shame. And it's starting to be noticed by, for instance, the rating agencies. Standard & Poor's just published on April 2nd a report entitled "Increasingly Unpredictable Federal Funding Could Stall U.S. Transportation Infrastructure Projects." Well, when you stall U.S. transportation infrastructure projects, you kill jobs. And that's what's happening. Here's how they describe it. Currently, the surface transportation bill remains mired in uncertainty. Holdups in funding reauthorizations and/or significant cuts in infrastructure programs are delaying some projects and forcing others to be scaled back. Delaying some projects means taking away jobs. Forcing others to be scaled back means taking away jobs. Here's what happened as they describe it. With the March 31st expiration of the Highway Trust Fund looming, Congress passed on March 29th, last minute, yet another extension to fund U.S. highway programs. This latest continuing resolution, the 9th, provides funding through June 30, 2012. As construction season begins in the northern half of the country, this continuing uncertainty in funding could force states to delay projects rather than risk funding changes or political gridlock come July. And that's exactly what's happening in Rhode Island and in many other states. I was home over our recess. I met with our very capable Director of Transportation, Michael Lewis. He served under Republican and independent administrations. And he says, I've got a list, Sheldon, I've got a list of all the projects that we want to get done this summer, in the summer highway construction season. You can't build highways in the winter in Rhode Island and in much of the country. So the work has to be done in the summer construction season. And he says, here's my list. If we have to live with this extension, if we don't find out until maybe the 4th of July what kind of money we're actually going to have to build these projects, he said, I can't take chances. I've got to start dropping projects off my list. And every one of the projects that falls off his list is jobs. Every project that falls off his list is an unemployed Rhode Islander. He estimated that there would be 1,000 unemployed Rhode Islanders because of this extension to June 30. So when people say, oh, we've extended the highway program until June 30, don't buy it. That is not a neutral act. That is a harmful act. That costs 1,000 jobs just in Rhode Island. So if it's extended further, the problem gets even worse. We cannot tolerate these continued extensions. We've got to get action on a long-term authorization. And to go back to the Standard & Poor's report, here's what they say. Once a long-term authorization is approved, we believe it will provide an impetus for transportation agencies to reconsider high-priority projects that had been shelved because of lack of funding. Those high-priority projects that had been shelved because of lack of funding, when they get taken off the shelf and put into the street, that's jobs. That's why this is a 3 million jobs bill, nearly. But they say if the authorization is extended by even more continuing resolutions, such high-priority projects will remain in limbo. So I intend to come to the floor as often as I can. I know there are other colleagues who want to come to the floor. We want to come every day. We want to set up a daily drumbeat of attention to the fact that a 3 million jobs bill is being held hostage in the House of Representatives by the Republican Speaker for political Washington insider reasons that have nothing to do with the merits. This is a bill that everybody is for. And to continue to urge that the Speaker take up the bipartisan, fully paid for, widely supported, very well legislated Senate MAP 21 highway bill. 3 million jobs depend on it. I'm here to urge the Speaker to please do his job, and I yield the floor.
Would the Senator yield for a question?
Gladly.
Did the Senator have the opportunity today, because I had a group from Louisiana in my office on the same subject, so I appreciate your leadership. It was a group of the American Engineering Society that was here in Washington today. I don't know if the Senator had an opportunity to meet with such a group, but have other groups come by your office to express, as this group did, their utter frustration with Congress's inability to get such a basic piece of legislation through? And, you know, did they tell you the same thing that they told me, which is, Senator, when engineers are not working in America, no one's working. We're the ones that are designing the projects to be built. If we're not designing them, they're not going to be built. And if you don't get this transportation bill passed for a longer period of time, we won't be going back to work. Is that the Senator's understanding when he meets with groups in his office?
Yeah, exactly. I have met with the Rhode Island road builders who are concerned